Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson, President of Corporate Audiovisual Services. And today we welcome back our co-host, Mr. Ryan Finch.
Hello, hello. What's going on? It's a beautiful day out. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. The construction next door is ruining both of those, but it's good to be back.
It's funny that you mentioned construction. We'll come back to that in just a little bit.
See what I did there?
But you know, Ryan, it's not a perfect day.
No? Tell me more.
Well, last night my team didn't do so well.
They
They had a perfectly good game going until they threw it all away in the third quarter.
Throwing it all away. Wow, that's
Yeah,
a
but
real shame.
they're back on Thursday. Don't worry. We'll right the ship. It'll be
This
okay.
is a sports talk show now.
We've gone sports. We went a little rogue. Here. Now, you have a little hockey game tonight, too?
I do. Big Rangers fan. You did try to bring this up once before after a very heartbreaking loss, and I absolutely refused to say anything about it. But tonight, I'm feeling good, optimistic.
Okay.
There we go. I'm ready.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. Well, look, we're glad to have you back, and today we're going to have some fun. Last week, we talked to Christine Burton from Make-A-Wish, Hudson Valley, and we then proceeded to actually host the event with them Friday night. They raised a ton of money. Excellent show. Darlene Rodriguez, ShopRite, and Mike Bennett from WHUD were all the very esteemed honorees, all incredible. And it was really a nice event. But Christine had a good conversation, too. But this week, we're going to have an entirely new conversation. And we're going to learn all sorts of new things today. But before we do that, Mr. Finch, why don't you tell everybody how they can find us?
Okie dokie. Well, you can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube live, of course. We are doing this live because you know that because you can drop us a comment and you can be part of the show. You couldn't do that if you weren't live. Pre-recorded, that doesn't work, right?
Good point.
That also happens 1 o'clock on Wednesdays, just like it's 1 o'clock, 1:03 exactly, on Wednesday today. And if you miss it, you'll see little bite-sized clips chopped up on Instagram, on Facebook, for some little chunkable pieces, right? Am I missing anything? Oh, like, comment, share, subscribe. Smash the subscribe button. There we go. Thank you very much. Show some love. Much appreciated. And, yeah, we're looking forward to another great conversation today.
Wow. You really made me jump around on that one.
Yeah, I try to keep you on your toes.
I felt like it was batting out of order a little bit, but that's okay. We need to, keep this thing fresh.
That's right.
But listen, why don't we get right into the show? We're going to tell you about today's guest, Mr. Tim Foley. So Tim Foley is the CEO and Executive Vice President of the Building and Realty Institute, BRI, a real estate trade association in Westchester County and the Hudson Valley. The BRI membership contains home builders, remodelers, commercial developers, existing multifamily apartment owners, co-op and condo boards, property managing agents, and others with an interest in housing and real estate in the region. The BRI exists to advocate for the best interests of the realty industry to government and the community, to provide knowledge and resources to our members, and to create opportunities for our members to build relationships and improve their businesses. Please, everyone, join me in welcoming Mr. Tim Foley.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Very glad to be here with you today.
Absolutely. Glad to have you.
This might be the first tie I've seen in a while. So this I feel very excited.
Well, I got to bring my A game with such two distinguished interviewers like yourself.
Well, you know who didn't bring their A game?
The Celtics.
They did not bring.
Sadly true. So as many folks know, I actually grew up in Boston. My dad was a Boston police officer, and my mom was a Boston public school teacher, which is about as Boston as you can get.
That is true.
My heart definitely still bleeds Celtic green, even though I've been down here for a number of decades.
Well, that is where my entire family and friends and everyone is just outside of the city. And, there's a little bit of grieving today, but they're going to recover. They'll be better on Thursday.
They've shown a remarkable ability to bounce back, and I'm sure that's going to absolutely work until suddenly and excruciatingly it doesn't.
I think that is kind of how it goes, doesn't it? Well, either way, listen, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Building and Realty Institute and your role there?
Sure, absolutely. So the BRI, the Building and Realty Institute, we're a trade association. And as you mentioned sort of at the top, we have a very broad spectrum of members. We have on the building side, we have home builders, remodelers, multifamily developers, commercial builders. On the realty side, we have existing multifamily apartment building owners, so landlords, co-op and condo boards, and property managing agents. But then we have a whole host of other folks who work within the real estate sphere who want to do business with all of the above. And that can be everybody from folks who sell uniforms to folks who do mold remediation to real estate attorneys to folks who are mortgage lenders or what have you. And we bring everybody together under a pretty big umbrella for three purposes. The first of which is, of course, networking, doing your business better, making the connections, getting into the rooms where interesting conversations are happening, where you can make the connections that'll have your business thrive. The second is education and training. We do a lot of programs for our members throughout the year, both on general topics that'll be of interest to the largest number of them about what the latest trends are and how things are changing, as well as a lot of specific programming. So things that a co-op or a condo board are interested in are very different from what a home builder might be interested in. So we do some of those niche programmings. But then the last piece is advocacy. And that's about being able to speak with one voice on the issues that affect our industry, both to elected officials as well as to members of the community.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. Well put. Honestly, that a lot of that is unfamiliar to me in general. I wouldn't say I'm well versed in the world of real estate, but I can appreciate that you have some multifaceted approaches to how you work with members and the community at large. I'm curious to know, how did you end up in this kind of role? I mean, were you a builder? Were you one of these various groups that you serve, or is it a kind of a different avenue?
Through a different avenue. I mean, my background is overwhelmingly in the areas of advocacy. I worked for Westchester Assemblywoman Amy Paulin for a number of years. I had worked through various labor unions, both in terms of building up their membership, in terms of communication, but also in terms of advocacy. When you think about it, a trade association is very similar to other member-driven organizations like labor unions or others. I have been only the third director of the BRI in its 76-year history, if you can believe that.
Wow, yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
Exactly. So it's a well-established brand, but we were looking to make sure that we're really putting our members in the driver's seat in terms of being able to take our mission forward. And just to mention it, it's no secret that oftentimes folks within our industry get tarred with a very broad brush. You hear a lot of stereotypes about the greedy developer, the greedy landlord, or the backwards thinking co-op board, or what have you. That doesn't describe most of our members. Most of our members are hardworking folks within their communities. They're doing their business right. They're valuable in terms of the local economy. They're valuable to their employees. And the real connective tissue for all of us is housing, which is something that we all need a lot more of. And in fact, here in Westchester, we're really suffering from the scarcity of. So we really want to put the spotlight on our members front and center. Except, of course, for today, where I'm the one talking to you. But in general, our mission has been to put our members front and center, what their stories are, and our common vision of how we help move our region forward.
All right. Well, it certainly sounds like that kind of makes up more or less the why, right? It's something that's near and dear to to you as a professional, right? This is something that you're seems like you're passionate about. I mean, especially for the type of role that you're working in for presumably such a long time. Considering the length of your predecessor. I mean, you said the fourth person for 75 years. Third. I'm sorry. Well, look at that. I added one.
6 years.
I have to wonder if when you time to go pass the torch, if there's like a white billowing smoke that comes out of the top, right? Like, okay, it's time to elect a new executive director.
Well, I do have to say, when I was applying for the role, the job security thing sort of flashes right off the page.
Oh, I could imagine.
Yeah, that's a lengthier interview, knowing that you're going to be there for 35 years. I mean, but the fact that you're referring to all the groups that really brought you here in the form of advocacy, I guess kind of makes sense from police force and teachers unions and that kind of background, like then into labor unions and construction. And it makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it really like that they were kind of all interlinked. And you're right about the housing being the one thing that connects everybody. Because that's always been, it's in the back of your head as the American dream, the white picket fence, the house, like that's always kind of a foundational piece for everyone.
Well, I think that's right, but I also think the notion for a lot of different people. One of the things that happened that left a huge impression on our work was Westchester County in 2019 came out with a housing needs assessment that really looked holistically at what the needs for housing were in the region. And there were two big takeaways from that. The first one is that there is a tremendous gap in terms of the need for housing and the amount of housing that we're actually building. And to be honest, it makes everything that we talk about in the housing space that much more difficult. So the Westchester County Housing Needs Assessment found that we needed 11,703 new units of housing that don't exist today just to keep up with present day demand. And that's before COVID hit. So you can imagine that makes disputes between landlords and tenants that much harder. It makes who gets to go into a co-op or who gets to go into a condo that much more difficult a conversation because we're really dealing with a scarcity mindset. But the second thing that report really underlined is that we need everything. We need all kinds of different housing to meet our needs, not just the single family home with the white picket fence that some people have in mind. There are some people who would be more happy and more comfortable in a townhouse where they don't have to even worry about right?
That's me.
They don't even have to worry about the yard. Or in a duplex, right? That's a tried and true housing stock, particularly for families, particularly starting out. We need a lot more senior housing. We need a lot more supportive housing. We basically need all kinds of different housing of all different shapes and sizes to meet the needs of where our workforce and where our residents are today. One thing I just want to outline is there are quite a number of people who don't want a single family house. They want something that's close to the train station, where they can get in and out of New York City, where there's a vibrant downtown that they can walk around, but they're still not in New York City. They're still demonstrably in the suburb or the community that they grew up in. That's what a transit-oriented development is. It's a walkable community. And we found that when you build enough of those, you not only attract millennials and seniors and young families and so on and so forth, but you actually have a major impact on the environment in terms of carbon emissions. And so all of these issues are all intersecting. The strength of our economy, the need to really tackle climate change in a serious way, and the need to meet our housing shortage.
That's a pretty big gap there, 11,703. So
and that's before people started getting the heck
moving
out of Dodge when COVID hit New York City, right? So we've actually seen a huge acceleration in terms of home values, home prices, which is good for people who currently own homes. But if you don't, it's pushed it increasingly out of reach in terms of affordability.
I guess that's why you have such a wide variety of members, because there is such a wide variety of needs from the commercial to the residential. It sounds like you're really involved in a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, it's, housing is fundamental to what we're able to do as a community. Right. If you're an employer, you're looking for where my employee is going to be able to live. If you're somebody who's trying to revitalize the downtown, where are the developers who are going to help me build this out, either commercially or in terms of housing? If you're trying to figure out why young people are moving away, or why the demographic that's shrinking for your community is the 30 to 45, that 30 to 45 young families that's always replenished us here in Westchester. The last two censuses, that's the demographic that's had the greatest decline. Well, a big part of that is housing. So, we have members from a lot of different industries, parts of the industry, from a lot of different communities here in Westchester. And we think if we put all this together, we can really make a lot of progress.
It's very cool. It's very cool. So, being that, I would imagine your industry to be a little more stable but with a lot of rules, a lot of regulations, a lot of rules. And I would imagine that those rules change fairly frequently. But how do you guys train for that? How do you communicate that? I mean, because I would imagine that that's really a big part of of what you're doing on the advocacy side.
Well, you're right.
How do you communicate?
It's on the advocacy as well as on the education and training side, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's no secret that there have been a huge number of changes that have come down from Albany over the past couple of years, some of which are on the construction side, quite a lot of which are on the rent stabilized housing side. And there are more things that are getting proposed all the time. In terms of being able to be an educational resource for our members, that's where a lot of the training comes in. You know, something gets passed, new regulations come out, you have to try and figure out how to adapt to it relatively quickly, because this winds up being, you know, very important for you to be able to actually safely and accurately run your business. So that's a big piece of it. But the other big piece of it is, you know, from our perspective, just on the political side of things, they're just getting started. For every one of these bills that's gotten passed, there are maybe 10 more that would have a major impact on our industry. Some of them quite positive, some of them really negative. And so the need for us to be at the table, to express what it's really like to run one of these businesses, to, if, for example, if you're a landlord, to talk about the particular bills that are going to be harmful to you and being able to make payroll, make your bottom line, but also to provide safe and dignified and stable housing for your tenants. That need is just going to grow over the next few years.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, one thing I'm you know, thinking as you're describing some of that, as far as the training goes, you know, look, a lot of us are in the, we'll call it communications field, where speaking to different groups of people is in the job description. I would have to imagine that, you know, my visualization of what a builder and an agent, who those types of people are, what kind of communication styles they have. Is there a difference to how you have to approach training with regards to the different types of groups that you serve?
Well, ultimately, you have to be able to meet people where they are, and that's not just in terms of your messaging, but also in terms of the medium that you're using. So, for example, one of the big challenges for us is trying to reinvent our programming and reinvent all of our training during COVID. And what we found was different things work better in different formats. So as mentioned, we do a lot of programs that are on a very general topic. We're trying to bring in a lot of different types of business owners or folks who work in housing at the same time. Those things they just work better in person for the most part. You can have some speakers and it's interesting, but it's also about who else is in the room. What questions are you able to ask? What connections are you able to make? What networking are you able to do? Some of the more pedagogical focused training that we do, where we need someone to come up to speed very quickly on some new changes or some new regulations. We need them to be able to get into to adapt to those very quickly. Actually, Zoom does wind up being better because you can run a number of those different sessions. People don't have to commute. They can take it from their office. They can take it on their lunch break or immediately after they finish work for the day. So ultimately, you kind of need to just figure out what's going to be the best way to reach people. One of the other things that's just worth mentioning is we're still at a point where COVID rates are, you know, high and occasionally increasing. Certainly they are today as we're having this interview. One of the things that we found that works for us for our general membership meetings is to do it hybrid style. And what that specifically means is we will still have the in-person component, because for some people that is critical. That's why they want to come to the meeting in the first place. But for other folks, they may, you know, have some health concerns. There may be a particular need why they don't want to be in a room with a bunch of people that they don't know. So we've been broadcasting all of our meetings on Facebook Live. So we get that sort of hybrid approach where if you want to be in the room, you're there. If you want to get the content, you just follow us on Facebook Live. And we've actually found that we get an additional third of our attendees through Facebook Live watching that video feed within the first 2 to 3 days. Some of them actually following it on the spot. So again, you just have to figure out what is going to work for the particular audience.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, a third is enough of a number to make it seem like it's really what's got to happen.
The first couple of times that it happened, I thought it was obviously something was wrong with the metrics. But then when it happened in successive months, I was like, no, this works for some people. And it doesn't just work for people who have health concerns. One of the things we perpetually had were for our meetings, as with any meeting, is last minute cancellation. You're stuck in the office, or you're stuck on a long call, or what have you, and you just can't make it. Well, now you can actually watch it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, that's a very, very common ask at this point. There's a lot of groups across the board are really in the same kind of space, right? And they also find that they like the fact that they know just how many people are tuning in, and sometimes what those demographics are and how they might be different. And, they're in many ways casting a wider net. So, it sounds like that's something that, your group has certainly taken advantage of as well.
For sure.
Very cool. I mean, it's funny because what you were just talking about, how certain meetings are better in person and others do translate to training online, we talk about all the time. We said this part is never going to go away because it works for this.
Yeah.
Whereas the things that are really people-based, networking-based, need that that communication. Those just don't really work that well. So
it's very hard to do a virtual golf outing, right? But for example, before we hosted sexual harassment prevention training as a benefit for our members, because it's required for all employers under New York state law. Mm-hmm. That's just as easy to do on Zoom. If you can make it interactive Absolutely. And interesting, it's just much easier for people to attend that way.
Especially if they can go back and then watch it afterwards in a different time, because that's really worked out well for a lot of things. So it sounds like you guys are actually more progressive in technology than I would have expected.
Well, as folks know, I started as the CEO for the BRI in January of 2020. So I had about 2 months to sort of get a feel for the organization, what it did well, and areas where our members were expecting us to sort of up our game. And then after that 2 months, literally everything changed. We had been an organization where 90% of what we did happened in person, and that was off the table for several months. And so we had no choice but to reinvent ourselves and to experiment. Some of those experiments were miserable failures, and we don't have to ever do that again. But some of them have actually worked out. And again, it's just a matter of finding the balance.
And was there any, differences? Again, I'm kind of getting back to a similar type of question, but were there any differences in terms of the types of groups that you're trying to reach and their ability to adapt to the technology, and how you may have to kind of plan things differently for your different audiences as you're all kind of trying to reinvent things at the same time? Or was it all kind of like, look, get on board because this is hard to do in a virtual setting?
Well, it's worth mentioning that, thinking of the 3 parts of our mission: the advocacy, the education, and then the connections and the networking. Folks who are in the organization for the advocacy, no trouble. They knew that we had to adapt to this new reality. We still had to do the work. We still had to find a way to participate, be it lobby days that were now virtual lobby days, right, or be them, interviews with News 12, which you can now do from outside your house or inside your house on Zoom or what have you. The Rent Guidelines Board within Westchester County, which is the board that sets the maximum limit of rent increases for rent stabilized units. Those meetings all had to be virtual. People got it. Similar with education. A lot of that stuff was able to translate relatively well. Not so much on the networking. We tried a lot of different things. Right. We tried different ways of sort of creating that virtual networking space, of having Zoom rooms that you could move in and move out of. We wound up using a lot of pre-recorded video to sort of simulate what would be a fun social event. So for our holiday reception, not a whole lot that we could do other than network, but we were able to use some pre-recorded video of some Victorian carolers to give it something of a festive air. We tried different things here or there. Nothing is the same as making that connection. And so we found that quite a number of folks who are members of ours could be in those rooms and have those meetings. That was an area where they were like, we really need to find a way to get this back to in person, because that personal touch is what we're looking for. So we actually moved back and resumed in-person meetings last fall. Obviously starting mostly outside, trying to do everything hybrid, trying a few different ways of doing it, and have really hit our stride so far this year.
No, it's very. I think I might have seen those carolers. They were pretty good.
Yeah.
They were not bad.
But we certainly understand the kind of some of the challenges you're talking about, and we see that part pretty consistently across the board. But I know that we see a number of different things in our industry and the communication side, and some challenges right now. And I didn't know how some of these things may have affected you, but I know one of the things we're running into right now was with the supply chain, and I know everybody's heard about that over the last 6 months. But it's a pretty big deal in the technology world. So, but I didn't know how it affects your membership, and so I am curious about that.
So as I like to say, we were worried about inflation before it was cool. Because back in 2020, it was not a story if you were not directly involved in making repairs in buildings or in construction. But that was really the big flashing warning sign was lumber prices. Lumber prices went absolutely through the roof. And building material prices right now are far, 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 far outpacing inflation. We just got a full report on this from the Bureau of Labor Statistics National Association of Home Builders. Building materials year over year in total as a category are up 19.2%. So that's well over 2.5 times the rate of inflation, which itself is historically high. And building materials in general are up 35.6% since the start of the pandemic.
Wow.
Lumber's been really bad. It went up, it went down, it went up, it went down. But in aggregate, overall, it still increased by 128% in 2021. Concrete is more closer to the level of inflation that other products are having, but gypsum, which gets used in plaster and drywall and ceiling tiles and so on and so forth, is up 17.8%, and just on and on and on. We have folks who are landlords who needed to replace washers or dryers or dishwashers, where all of a sudden it was backloaded 6 months or more. We had folks who started replacing windows about a year ago and, were parceling out the project based on what they could afford within their multi-story structure. Now all of a sudden to finish the job costs 50% more per window. So those costs have just been out of control. The delays have been really, really bad. It's also worth mentioning that this is unfortunately where new legislation and the realities of inflation collided in a very, very bad way. So as mentioned, they passed a big law in 2019 overhauling the way that rent stabilized apartments were regulated. A big piece of that is it changed how much could be recouped in future rent for making improvements to individual apartments and major capital improvements for a building. So like fixing a boiler, fixing a roof, redoing all of your windows to make them energy efficient or just functional. And because they changed how much could be recouped on that, and all of these prices are going several times the rate of inflation, that unfortunately is leading to a lot of landlords that I deal with, particularly smaller landlords or folks who only have a couple of buildings, saying, I can't even figure out how to make these fixes because it just doesn't make financial sense. So it's hitting our industry very, very badly.
So what do they do when they realize that? They say, this doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Do I want to stay in this? Do I want to keep, what do they do?
Right now, the short answer is a lot of them postpone. And that's not great. It's not great for the building because most of these buildings are before 1974. So they're decades and decades old. It's not good for the tenants who would like these things to be fixed, or they would like there to be a more reliable boiler within the system, or honestly, they would just like new appliances. Right now, the answer has been it just got to get postponed because if it can't get fixed, if the cost can't be recouped through rent, and if financing for multifamily has hit a pause, which it really has over these last couple of years because of these costs, everyone keeps pushing it off and saying, we're just going to wait till next year and see what happens. Something ultimately has to be done. We're engaged in conversations with various legislators on ways that those changes could be tweaked, because I think the full extent of the effects that they're having on these properties was not really well understood at the time. They passed a whole lot of changes. This was the area that they probably paid some of the least attention to, but it's having the most immediate effect right now.
Wow. You know, and I guess it's easy from my perspective because I am a renter, right? So I end up being somewhere towards the bottom of the food chain as far as how these changes are kind of flowing downstream. I'd have to imagine that there's also a lot of pressure from the community at large for people in your position to be able to help with these things, because it all works hand in hand, right? It's everybody's, you know, trying to have more or less the same thing happen, where we're trying to have communities and you know, ample units to support and house all the families in you know, this area. So, I mean, do you find that you're at times caught in the middle of kind of a struggle at times?
Well, I think that's exactly right. I mean, like oftentimes, again, just talking of the perspective of a property owner, from a landlord or even a co-op board or a condo board, at a certain point, you can't argue with math, but not everybody has to be confronted with the math. So legitimately for tenants who want to see maybe updated appliances or maybe some changes or what, or, you know, trying to figure out why the building is starting to feel a little bit worn, a little bit run down, they just see the problem. They don't see that, you know, these changes happened and it affected them in such and such a way. Nor are they paying attention to how much building costs have gone up through the roof. If they're not paying directly for heat, they're not seeing how much oil and natural gas and so on and so forth. Those have escalated. They were on the rise even before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, and we're all seeing that every time we go to the pump ourselves, what the effect of that is. But by the same token, one of the things that I want to sort of focus on in terms of the positive is people may not immediately understand how all of these things work together. One of the things the pandemic did do is it really brought together a sense of appreciation for folks who make these multifamily communities thrive and grow. There were a lot of staff who were on the front lines. There were a lot of managing agents who, you know, their job is when there's an emergency to drop everything and go in with their masks and with social distancing at the height of the pandemic. There were a lot of folks who were remodelers, where their entire business model involves being able to go into a house and in a safe way, you know, make the changes that people want. And one of the things that we have had some success in doing, there was a picture that you showed just from the top, is we were, for example, able to partner with managing agents and frontline staff who are members of the union 32BJ with Westchester County Executive George Latimer to get COVID tests out to everybody. There we go. That's the picture right there. To the folks who are working in these multifamily buildings, who are very much on the front lines, you know, giving them the tools that they needed to keep themselves and their families safe while they're doing the job that really makes all of these buildings function. So we're, you know, it's not all confrontation. There's a lot of opportunity for collaboration as well.
No, that makes sense. I do think that people appreciate the area that they live in and the parts that are moving around it. I think they sometimes just get bogged down in their own situation that's right in front of them. You know, I know I was very unhappy to see the oil truck pull up this morning at 7 o'clock. I was not real thrilled about that. I thought I was going to be able to make it until September right now. So, you know, that's a very big bill.
Yeah, what a year to have a cold spring.
Right.
Yeah, so it's you know, it's not appreciated right this second. But I have had, you know, I'm on the flip side where I've had work done, you know, in a single family home, and you know, there's things that you're just putting off at this point due to everyone saying, no, this is too expensive. I can't get this, you know. But I'm also hearing about another challenge, and it's certainly one that affects us. And that's in the staffing as well. Like, so for us, we look at it as staffing, but you know, it's probably a little different thought process, but you still need people to do the work. And I wonder how that's affecting your membership.
Well, and it's no secret that particularly when you're talking about construction and repairs, that we were facing a labor shortage even before the pandemic, right? People, for a long time, there was a reliable pipeline where you just said, you know, you may not be going to college, but you can have a lifelong career. You can have enough money to raise a family by getting into the building trades, by getting into construction, by becoming an electrician, by becoming a plumber. And there was a reliable path to the middle class through that. At some point, things got disconnected and we just were not funneling anywhere near the number of young people looking for careers into construction. And we're still seeing that shortage here today, particularly in Westchester, but it's a nationwide problem. There's a huge gap in the number of open construction jobs and the number of people who are available for that. And so that's an area where we've been trying to work with a lot of local groups on the ground, like Guidance Center of Westchester and Soulful Synergy, who are these organizations that do a lot of pre-apprenticeship programs, which is for young folks who are in high school or about to graduate from high school, who maybe have not had any in-depth understanding of even just being a handy person or using tools or working with their hands, so on and so forth, giving them that sort of exposure to what construction jobs look like, with the hopes that they'll then move on to the next step, which is either becoming a handy person or getting involved in an apprenticeship program going into construction, that sort of thing. We had a whole lively discussion at our membership meeting in February just on this very topic. And it's very interesting. There are a lot of, high schools in our region who, for whatever reason, dialed down their commitment to shop class, right? And as a direct result, folks who are trying to figure out, where they're going to go after high school, what are they going to do for a career, aren't naturally gravitating to these same types of jobs in the rates that they once used to. If you look around Westchester County, I mean, obviously with a gap of 11,703 homes, we need more people building. We need to be able to build more, and that also means a lot of jobs for people who are going to do that work. And the same is certainly true for a lot of our existing building. We need repair people, right? We know we need handy persons, we need superintendents, we need folks who are going to keep our housing in good working order. So we're trying to partner as much as we can with some of the folks who are doing some of that pre-apprenticeship work, because, whether it's trying to get people involved through BOCES or trying to get people involved with vocational schools, so on and so forth, there's a piece of that pipeline that's just not functioning very well right now, and we need to move forward on it.
Sure, and I don't know if this would fall under training or advocacy or networking for that matter, but you talk about that pipelining, wanting to grow that. Is that part of your work with the BRI? Is there a role that you fill there in trying to recruit people to these pipelines? Is that a function of what you do?
For the most part, we're trying to make connections with the groups that are already doing that,
right?
Whether they're through the pre-apprenticeship programs or some of the other established programs, and then connecting them to our members who are doing the construction, who will have the future job placements. That's really where our focus has been, is on making those connections.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, we've had similar challenges to Joe's point, as far as trying to recruit the younger generation to get involved in a trade skill, right? Yeah. I mean, right now staffing is just a huge challenge for us, kind of across the board. So we have a program that we put together. We've talked on the show before, called Pirate University, and that's just kind of like a fun few day training seminar that we've now had to kind of take hybrid and try to appeal to those groups, because again, trying to learn or trying to convince people to develop a skill that applies well to in-person events while there were no in-person events it's a tough sell. So sure. Now, I mean, again, I feel like with all the building projects that, again, to me as somebody from the complete outside, right, I don't really know the inner workings of the industry, but it seems like there's a lot of building going on right now. I mean, I live in White Plains, right? And there are at least 3 apartment building, like high rises, that are at least halfway done. So I mean, I guess maybe it's a sense of like, is this a volume that is greater than it ever was before, or is it just just like you said, it's just a lack of pipeline? I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, what the demand is now versus maybe what it was historically.
It depends on where you are. So
Sure.
There are some places in particular, some, areas of New Rochelle, areas of Yonkers, certainly some parts of White Plains, where they are trying to move forward and trying to create new projects. And that's very exciting. There's a lot of jobs. There's a ton of economic activity. We actually find that when you build some of these multifamily housing, it helps two things that everyone in Westchester is concerned about. It helps stabilize your school district financing because the amount of property taxes that these new homes will bring in is going to vastly exceed the amount that will actually get spent on educating the children. We actually came out with a recent study where we looked back on multifamily development over the past 5 to 7 years on what did happen, not what was projected to happen, and found that that was a huge benefit. And it also brings more jobs, more economic activity, and particularly into your downtowns, because you have both short-term jobs doing the construction, but also long-term jobs, the folks who are going to continue servicing those people who live there. So there are plenty of communities that are starting to move forward, but there are a lot where, you know, they're a little bit wishy-washy, or they have sort of an inefficient land use process, because a lot of the actually most of the land use decisions are made at the hyper local level, at a town board, at a village board, at a local planning board, so on and so forth. And not everyone feels the same sense of urgency. And also not everyone necessarily has a grounding in the economics or even what the needs of their own particular community are. So one of the things that we have been trying to do is we're one of the leading organizations in the Welcome Home Westchester campaign, which is really trying to drive a new conversation, a very fact-based and not fear-based conversation about what would actually happen if we were to achieve building the housing that we need within this region. What are the positives? What are the negatives? And what are the things that people who sometimes show up at planning boards with pitchforks and torches, this absolutely cannot be here in my neighborhood. What they're getting wrong, right? Because oftentimes they're not asked to check their work in terms of some of the dire predictions that they've made. So we're checking their work for them, because we do believe housing is an absolute imperative. We're seeing the problems of not having the housing that we need on any given basis. A lot of the things that annoy people about construction can be mitigated. And we're not saying that every project is a perfect project, but we're also saying that a lot of the things that people are most concerned about turn out in the final analysis just not to happen. And the more we can tell people about that, the better.
Well, you guys got a lot going on, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot.
Westchester's an exciting region. We've got a lot going on. It's how you do better and grow and thrive, is by trying new things and trying to get into good rooms to have good conversations.
So what do we think is kind of next in trying to reach new members or better serve your current membership?
Well, one of the good news for us is that our membership certainly grew over the last couple of years, which is really, really great. But there's still a lot of folks who, to be perfectly honest, don't know about our organization, which is why I was very happy to come on and sort of give folks an understanding of what we're doing. We're going to continue firing on all thrusters in terms of having these different types of programs and trainings that people really need. One thing I didn't even mention is that co-op boards, for example, in Westchester County are now required to do fair housing training for their board members. So we made that a members only benefit, and we trained over 970 co-op board members since August. Again, all online, all through Zoom, all compliant with the new law that was passed here in Westchester County. And those opportunities are going to keep coming up, and we're going to keep trying to provide good benefits for our members and good information, and so they can do their business better. That's what it's ultimately all about.
Very cool. That's how you kind of want your advocacy group, working for you, to be honest. Because like I said, I think there's a lot to what you guys are doing. I mean, there's always been a lot of regulations, and for good reasons. And I'm sure they're constantly changing, and not all for the best. So
they are. And as the saying always goes, you're either at the table or you're on the menu.
That's well put. Yeah.
Wow. Finch, you didn't know that one, did you?
No. And
that's because you're on the menu.
I was just going to say, I think I know where I am on that spectrum. Wow.
Well, listen, Tim, I don't want to tie you up too much, but I got to tell you, I've learned so much. I didn't know anything about this housing gap, number one. The fact that it's that large is incredible.
Yeah.
But, and that you're working with such a variety of different people in the housing field, that really gives you a better perspective, to be honest, because you are covering the entire gamut of whether from construction or, housing materials. Like you've got it all linked together. So it is interesting. But, we appreciate all of your time today. It's been great. And you're obviously a master of technology now. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, aren't we all at this point in time? The future's here, and it apparently involves looking at your screen for several hours a day.
Yes, it does. But we only have to dress from the waist up, so that helps.
Well, that's true, and you never have like a Klingon or a Romulan looking back at you from the other side of the screen. So we still have some ways to go.
That's right.
We do have some ways to go. Well, listen, hopefully our local team comes back in action on Thursday.
We'll see,
and we get this back going, because I can't talk about the Red Sox right this second.
Yeah,
we're not going to worry about them right now. They're not
going to skip over that one.
Hey, we're gonna bypass that. Ryan, good luck to your Rangers tonight. I hope they do well. But Tim, we're gonna wrap things up here, let you get back to doing your work and advocacy, and we appreciate all your time today. This has really been great.
Well, thank you guys for the conversation. This has been fantastic, and you flashed our website a few times, buildersinstitute.org. Folks should definitely, if you have an interest in these or other topics, please feel free to check us out, try one of our programs.
Wonderful.
Excellent.
Thanks very much, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys.
You got it. Well, Mr. Ryan, now you know a lot more.
Indeed. You know what? I got to say, one of the things that absolutely did not occur to me is the impact on like the school budgets, right? Because again, I don't have children. The last time I thought about school was when I was in it, but obviously when you're trying to settle down and settle down at a place where you want to raise a family, that becomes, very pertinent. It's just, to your point, it's amazing how very tied together so many different ends of our market and economy actually are intertwined with housing. That's just not something I'd considered before.
Well, and we're pretty fortunate that we actually do live in a really nice area, so that's a major plus, and that's part of the reason there's such a big gap, I'm sure.
Right.
But look, and this is, nobody knew they were going to get this on AVX Live, but here we are, right at the center of our community.
There you go.
Well, Mr. Finch, everybody, you can check out buildersinstitute.org. Please, if you're involved in anything related to the housing industry, Tim and his team are going to be the people that you want to connect with. So please check that out.
Yeah, I know a particular lady who might be interested in this sort of thing, having just begun a new career in real estate. So,
well, it seems like we've just helped everyone then.
Yeah, right. That's right. There you go.
All right, Mr. Finch, let's tell them how they can find us.
Okay, I'm going to do it again. Out of order. You're never going to know. Here we go. You can find us on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube Live. If you're watching, you're tuning in, drop us a comment, be part of the show. And while you're there, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the above. Much appreciated. Keep an eye out on Instagram and Facebook for some bite-sized pieces of this great conversation and more to come. I think I got it all. I think
you did. I think you got them all.
One of these days I'll remember how many points there are, and then because usually I'm just winging it, but that's okay. Anyway.
I think you're fine.
Yep.
Well, very good. Very good. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to having a great week. We will see you next Wednesday, 1 p.m.
All right. Let's go Rangers.
See you later. Go Celtics.